The film begins in a quiet rural town in Michigan, where teenager David Rice lives under the same roof as his abusive father, Will. David's mother abandoned them when he was just 5 years old, and ever since, the father-son relationship has been strained and distant. For David, school serves as a brief sanctuary from his chaotic home life. He's mostly a loner, but secretly harbors feelings for one of his classmates, Millie Harris. One afternoon, after school, he surprises her with a snow globe containing a miniature replica of the Eiffel Tower. Millie, who dreams of seeing the world, is absolutely thrilled by the gesture. However, their sweet exchange is ruined when the school bully, Mark, shows up. He mocks David for being a nerd and hurls the snow globe onto the frozen surface of the Huron River. Determined to retrieve the gift, David ignores Millie's concern and steps out onto the ice. But just as he picks it up, the ice beneath his feet gives way. David plunges into the icy water and is swiftly pulled away by the current. Desperately trying to reach the surface, he's suddenly ripped out of the river and reappears, drenched and bewildered, right in the middle of a public library nearby. Still shaken and freezing, David chooses to brush it off and heads home. But as soon as he arrives, his father starts yelling at him for being late from school. Not wanting to escalate things, David storms up to his room and locks the door, retreating to a corner. It isn't long before a furious Will tries to break in. Just as the door is about to be forced open, David mysteriously vanishes again, this time reappearing in the same library. This moment marks the beginning of his realization. David may have the strange ability to teleport. Curious, he concentrates as hard as he can, and to his amazement, he finds himself back in his room, only minutes after disappearing. Recognizing this as his escape from a miserable life, David quickly grabs his savings and flees to start anew. Before leaving town, he stops by Millie's place to drop off the snow globe, his way of letting her know he's alive. Then he heads to the city, rents a shabby motel room, and begins to test his newfound powers. At first, the results are messy. He crashes into a tree at the local park a few times, but with practice and focused visualization, he improves. His first successful jump takes him to the Empire State Building, where he holds fond memories of his mother Mary. Weeks go by, and David becomes more confident in his abilities. He learns he can only teleport to places he can clearly picture. So he cleverly visits a bank, sneaks a peek at the vault under the guise of using the bathroom, and later teleports inside at night to steal bags full of cash. By morning, the heist is discovered and the police are alerted. Soon, a mysterious man named Roland appears at the bank, claiming to be with the National Security Agency. Roland says he's handled similar cases before and strongly suspects a jumper, a person who can teleport, is responsible. The story jumps ahead 8 years. David is now living an extravagant life. He owns a luxurious penthouse in New York, filled with expensive items. No longer a teen, David has mastered his powers, and his walls are covered with landmark photos for easy teleportation access. One evening, he jumps to London and enters a pub. So relaxed with his abilities, David casually uses them for small things. At the bar, he teleports beside a beautiful girl sitting alone, catching the attention of another jumper, Griffin O'Connor, who watches him closely. David, unaware he's being observed, leaves the pub with the girl. Meanwhile, Roland is seen hunting another jumper deep in the jungles of Brazil. As the young jumper tries to escape, he's ensnared in an electrified wire net, preventing any teleportation. It's then revealed that Roland is part of a secretive group known as the Paladins, zealous hunters of jumpers who believe people with such powers are unnatural. Without hesitation, Roland kills the boy. Moments later, he receives a tip about the bank robbery case. Back in New York, David returns to his penthouse only to discover Roland waiting for him. Not recognizing the intruder, David tries to kick him out, but Roland shocks him with a specialized baton delivering 1,000 volts of electricity, preventing him from teleporting more than a few feet. A fierce battle follows. After a tense struggle, David manages to teleport into a hidden room behind his wall, grabs a stash of money, and vanishes. But Roland isn't backing down. He dispatches his men to all of David's known jump locations. While searching, he finds an old photograph of Millie in a cabinet and forms a devious plan. Meanwhile, David jumps back to his childhood room in Michigan. After an awkward reunion with his father, he pays a visit to Millie's house. Her mother tells him that Millie now works at a bar nearby. David heads over but loses his nerve when he sees her. As he tries to slip out unnoticed, he accidentally runs into a grown-up Mark. Mark instantly recognizes David and bombards him with a stream of questions. His loud reaction is overheard by Millie, who walks over to the pair just moments later. She reveals that she saw David when he first arrived and had been waiting for him to say something. This makes Mark jealous, prompting him to make a move on her, only for David to land the first punch. A full-on fight breaks out, escalating quickly, but with no one paying attention, both suddenly teleport out of sight. Moments later, they reappear inside the very bank vault David had robbed years ago. He intimidates Mark briefly before jumping away, leaving him stuck inside the vault as a form of payback. David then heads back to the bar and finally sits down for a real conversation with Millie. She admits that she's given up on her dreams of traveling the world, having had to face the realities of adult life and work. In contrast, David lies and claims to be a banker, subtly suggesting he's financially well off. He then invites her to Rome, and she eagerly agrees. However, unbeknownst to them, Griffin has been tracking David and overhears their plan. Meanwhile, Mark gets arrested by the police on suspicion of robbery. Not long after, Roland shows up at the station, posing as a CIA agent. He interrogates Mark and pretends to believe every bizarre detail of his story. Mark explains everything he knows about David, and about Millie, the girl he's clearly in love with. Upon hearing this, Roland realizes she's the same girl whose photo he found in David's apartment. He immediately orders his team to find her. It isn't long before he learns she's just left for Rome, and he dispatches his men after her. 10 hours pass, and David and Millie arrive in Rome, checking into a lavish hotel. They later head out and soak in the sights of the city together. The next scene finds them exploring the Colosseum, where David tries to access its lower levels. Unexpectedly, he runs into Griffin. A stunned David attempts to walk away, but Griffin teleports directly in front of him. He then reveals that there are other jumpers like them scattered across the globe. Following this, Griffin scolds David for being reckless with his teleporting. He warns that David's careless behavior has attracted the attention of dangerous people. At the same time, a group of Paladins storms into the Colosseum and begins to pursue them. One of them shocks David with a baton, rendering him unconscious. Griffin, however, knows how to handle them. He vanishes and starts taking the enemies out one by one. Once the coast is relatively clear, he helps revive David and explains the Paladin organization, fanatics who hunt jumpers, before disappearing again. Suddenly, a Colosseum employee appears and sees the scattered unconscious bodies. She cries out for help, and in a panic, David leaps into the teleportation scar left behind by Griffin. He emerges in a hidden desert hideout in Egypt. Griffin is furious upon seeing him and scolds him for abandoning Millie in Rome. Realizing his mistake, David rushes back, only to find the police waiting. He and Millie are both arrested. 8 hours later, Italian authorities are still questioning David, but they can't press charges until a US magistrate arrives. To his shock, the person who walks in is none other than his mother, Mary. Before he can react, she releases him from his cuffs and urgently tells him to flee. She warns that more Paladins are on their way. David tries to go after her, but a police officer gets in his way, so he teleports to the waiting area and tells Millie he was released after an intense investigation. She's skeptical that it was that easy, but David urges her to trust him and escorts her to the airport. At the airport, Millie demands some answers. She's confused as to why they're fleeing if everything is supposedly resolved. David gives her no explanation. He simply says they can't be together anymore. Feeling abandoned and lied to, she boards a plane back to Michigan by herself. Shortly afterward, David reappears at Griffin's hideout and learns that he hunts and kills Paladins. Griffin justifies his actions by saying that the Paladins are hunting their kind and are so ruthless that if they can't get a jumper, they'll go after loved ones. Alarmed, David starts worrying about his estranged father back in Michigan. Millie, however, is safe for now since she's still mid-flight. The next scene shows David teleporting back to his childhood home, only to discover his father lying lifeless on the floor. Roland had already been there. Devastated, David realizes that his reckless actions have led to tragedy. But there's no time to grieve. He must act fast to stop Roland before Millie lands. Filled with rage, David jumps back to Griffin's hideout and tries to steal his journal, which holds extensive research on the Paladins, especially the one who killed his dad. But Griffin refuses, warning that Roland is far too dangerous to take on lightly. With no better idea, David suggests they team up to take Roland down. At first, Griffin refuses. He prefers to work alone. But after David persists, he finally agrees to join forces. They teleport to the Michigan airport, only to discover they're too late. Millie's already landed and left. Panic sets in, and David immediately jumps to the bar where she used to work. He questions the staff and learns from a waitress that a strange man had also been looking for Millie. Realizing it must be Roland, David teleports to her apartment. Thankfully, she's safe. He tries to explain how he got there, but she's still furious about what happened in Rome, and wants nothing to do with him. Just then, Roland and his crew show up, prompting David to instantly grab Millie and jump with her to Griffin's hideout. This infuriates the veteran jumper, knowing full well that the Paladins possess a device capable of opening wormholes through jump scars. Sadly, Griffin's fears come true. Roland's team arrives equipped with the machine and puts it to immediate use. As the wormhole begins to form, David and Griffin take refuge in a hidden cave. While there, David stumbles upon Griffin's research and is stunned to discover that it includes his own mother, Mary, who turns out to be a Paladin as well. Before he can confront Griffin, Roland suddenly appears and uses his electric cables to subdue David. He moves in to kill him, but Griffin steps in, slicing the wires with a flamethrower, then tackles Roland, sending them both tumbling back into the wormhole. Their battle continues in Millie's Michigan apartment. Meanwhile, Millie, confused but determined, cuts the wires holding David. She makes him promise to leave her alone after taking her home. David agrees, though he also admits that she's been the only girl he's ever loved, since childhood. As they share a quiet moment, Griffin bursts in, carrying the Paladins' wormhole machine. Right then, Roland activates a hook through a jump scar and manages to snatch Millie, pulling her back through the scar just before it closes. In the chaos that follows, Griffin begins assembling a remote-controlled bomb, intending to eliminate all the Paladins in one strike, even if Millie dies in the process. Refusing to let that happen, David grabs the bomb and jumps, dropping it off at the Coliseum. Griffin immediately chases after him, and they begin teleporting in a wild battle across the globe. Eventually, they end up in a war zone in Chechnya. Amid the gunfire, Griffin reclaims the detonator, but David jumps him, slamming him into an electrified pylon, effectively trapping the seasoned jumper. With Griffin restrained, David heads back to Millie's apartment, where he finds her tied to the wall. He foolishly rushes in, only for Roland to strike him with an electric baton. The Paladin then binds David above Millie, restraining each of his limbs with charged cables. Confident that the electricity will hold him, Roland prepares to finish the job. At this pivotal moment, Millie apologizes for doubting everything and confesses that she loves him. Empowered by her words, David pushes his abilities to the limit. In a flash, the entire room disappears, transported into the middle of the Huron River. Dazed and submerged, David starts to sink, but Millie swims to his aid. She kisses him deeply, giving him the strength to teleport them both to an old library. Roland follows the jump scar and emerges inside the library moments later. But before he can react, David lunges at him, and the two vanish from sight. When they reappear, they're deep inside a remote cave in the Grand Canyon. David tells Roland he could have left him to die in the ocean with sharks, but instead, he's choosing mercy. With that, David disappears, stranding the Paladin alone. Several days later, David pieces together clues and finally tracks down his mother in a snowy region. He demands to know the truth, and Mary admits she left because of his powers. She confesses she still loves him, but the only thing she can truly offer is a head start. Realizing that she's aligned with his enemies, David leaves without looking back. He later reunites with Millie, and together they teleport to somewhere warmer. Finally free, at least for now.